The most potent German tank in the West had met its match, but the Americans didn't even know it was there. It was precisely 7:42 a.m. on the morning of March 6, 1945. Corporal Clarence Smuyer was tucked into the tight confines of his tank turret, an M26 Pershing, amidst the soot-covered debris of Cologne's fractured streets. He watched as the barrel of a formidable German Panther tank slowly traversed toward the intersection, aiming right where two of his unit's American Shermans had just halted. Smuyer, just 21 years old and 7 months deep into the relentless combat across the landscapes of France and Germany, was already a veteran, credited with neutralizing 5 enemy tanks. The quiet tension shattered instantly. The Panther roared, discharging its powerful main cannon not once, but twice. Both high-velocity rounds slammed through the front of the lead Sherman's gun shield, impacting mere inches apart. 3 crewmen inside the American tank were killed instantly. The commander attempted a frantic escape, only to collapse, his lower left leg already gone. Smuyer was a quiet man, raised in the coal mining regions of Peville, Pennsylvania. His father had spent his life underground. Smuyer himself had never participated in a physical fight. He'd hunted just once, for a rabbit, and the experience had left him deeply unsettled. Now, he was positioned behind the sights of what was intended to be America's strongest fighting machine, observing thick smoke billowing from a wrecked Sherman just 2 blocks away. By March 1945, the U.S. Army had suffered the loss of thousands of Sherman tanks to superior German ordnance. The Panther tanks significantly outweighed the Sherman, carrying 10 extra tons of steel. The massive Tiger tanks were heavier still. German 75mm and 88mm guns possessed the devastating capability to penetrate Sherman armor, plating at ranges where the American 75mm rounds simply rebounded off the thicker German steel. Just 3 months prior, during the agonizing Battle of the Bulge, American tank battalions had faced near annihilation. Entire companies found themselves losing half their armored vehicles in single engagements. The statistics regarding crew survival were brutally clear. If your Sherman took a solid hit, you had mere seconds to scramble free before the onboard ammunition exploded, effectively transforming the 33-ton steel vehicle into a lethal crematorium. The inherent problem had been glaringly obvious since the Normandy landings. Yet, the effective solution had been deliberately postponed for 3 long years. Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, head of Army Ground Forces Command, staunchly maintained that the existing Sherman fleet was perfectly adequate. He argued that specialized tank destroyers were designated to manage enemy armor threats. American military doctrine explicitly stated that tanks were meant to support infantry and should actively avoid direct tank-versus-tank engagements. However, German tactical doctrine was diametrically opposed to this philosophy. More importantly, the brutal reality on the battlefield proved the German approach correct. As early as 1942, the Ordnance Department had initiated designs for a significantly heavier tank. This T-26 development program yielded multiple prototypes. Each new design iteration incorporated thicker armor, featured an improved main cannon, and refined the suspension system. Critically, each progressive version also accumulated more overall weight and complexity. General McNair and his staff systematically rejected every single proposal. The Sherman had performed adequately in North Africa, they reasoned. Why bother fixing something that wasn't broken? By 1944, that stubborn argument was leading directly to the deaths of American tankers across Europe. The massive scale of the Battle of the Bulge changed the strategic equation overnight. In December 1944, a powerful counterthrust involving 400 German tanks, including the formidable Panthers and Tiger IIs, utterly smashed into the American defensive lines. Sherman crews fought with genuine bravery, but frequently perished in swift succession. After the catastrophic losses sustained in the Ardennes, it became utterly impossible for anyone to credibly argue that the Sherman was sufficient. In January 1945, the first shipment of 20 T-26 E3 tanks, later officially designated as the M26 Pershing, finally arrived at the Belgian port of Antwerp. General Omar Bradley decided to split the limited number, allocating 10 to the experienced 3rd Armored Division and the remaining 10 to the 9th Armored Division. These cutting-edge tanks reached a critical maintenance facility near Aachen, Germany, on February 17th. Division commanders immediately selected their most skilled crews for specialized training. The Pershing utilized a different, more powerful transmission system than the Sherman, but the driving controls remained generally similar. Each crew was required to fire 28 rounds to gain familiarity with the powerful 90mm main gun. The muzzle flash was startlingly larger. The physical recoil was much more violent. The resultant noise was deafening, even when wearing the protective intercom headsets. Smouyer vividly recalled his initial live-fire test. A derelict farmhouse stood 1,200 yards away downrange. Major General Maurice Rose, the commanding officer of the 3rd Armored Division, stood approximately 20 feet behind the tank, accompanied by his staff officers. Rose had personally designated the target, the small farmhouse chimney. Smouyer carefully centered the reticle and pulled the firing trigger. The resulting muzzle blast concussion violently knocked Rose and every officer nearby flat onto their backs. The chimney instantly erupted into fragments. Rose quickly got back to his feet, brushed the dirt from his uniform, and grinned broadly. Smouyer successfully struck 2 additional chimneys at greater distances. Rose immediately approved the Pershing for deployment into combat. If you are eager to witness how Smouyer's experimental tank performed during its trial by fire on the streets of Cologne, please take a moment to hit that like button. Every single like genuinely helps the channel The Battlefield share these vital, often overlooked stories with a much wider audience. Also, please subscribe to stay updated. Now, back to Corporal Smouyer. The first Pershings entered actual combat near the Roer River on February 25th. One tank was disabled the very next day by a cleverly hidden Tiger, but the remaining Pershings managed to destroy multiple German tanks at tactical ranges where the older Shermans would have been utterly defenseless. By early March, the 3rd Armored Division was relentlessly pushing toward the Rhine River. Cologne, situated on the western bank, was Germany's 4th largest industrial metropolis, now transformed into a desolate landscape of smoking ruins and rubble. A staggering 262 Allied bombing raids had reduced the vast majority of the city to fractured stone and twisted girders. Only the magnificent twin spires of the Cologne Cathedral remained standing, soaring above the destruction like majestic stone sentinels. On the morning of March 6th, Smouyer's crew received their new orders. They were tasked with spearheading the advance directly into Cologne city center. Their Pershing, one of only 20 operational in the entire European theater, was designated to be the first vehicle through every intersection. The first to draw fire from every concealed anti-tank position. General Rose himself had personally chosen their crew for this incredibly hazardous mission. It was supposed to be considered a great honor. Smouyer nervously touched the small Bible tucked into his breast pocket and watched the streets ahead narrow into ominous shadows. The powerful Pershing lurched into motion precisely at 0800 hours. Staff Sergeant Robert Early commanded the tank from the turret. Corporal John Dergy handled the loading of the heavy 90mm rounds. Private Homer Davis assisted with the bow machine gun. Private William McVeigh was the driver, and Smouyer operated the main gun. They had been fighting together as a crew since September 1944, battling their way through the hedgerows of Normandy and the snow drifts of the Ardennes, all in a Sherman. 3 weeks prior, they had been assigned to Pershing. The crew had affectionately named their new tank Eagle 7, in tribute to the Philadelphia Eagles football team. Before the war, Cologne had housed a population of 1 million. Now, perhaps only 40,000 residents remained, sheltering in cellars and vast subway tunnels beneath literal mountains of broken debris. The thoroughfares were now canyons formed of shattered masonry. Apartment buildings, some 3 stories tall, had collapsed entirely onto the roadways. Tram lines twisted into the air like strange, metallic vines. Every single intersection presented a dozen potential firing locations for German Panzerfaust teams. Every basement window could conceal a devastating 88mm anti-tank gun. The 3rd Armored Division had entered the outskirts of Cologne on March 2nd. For days of grueling, close-quarters house-to-house fighting ensued. The German defenders skillfully utilized the city's complex infrastructure against the advancing Americans. Underground pedestrian tunnels linked basements across entire city blocks, a network the soldiers grimly nicknamed mouse trails. German infantry would suddenly appear behind established American positions, attack, and then vanish back underground before anyone could effectively respond. Snipers targeted movement from factory smokestacks and church steeples. Anti-tank crews exercised extreme patience, waiting until American vehicles passed their positions before firing into the much thinner rear armor. The inherent advantages of the Pershing were undeniable. Its frontal armor measured 4 inches thick, offering twice the protection compared to the Sherman. The high-powered 90mm gun was easily capable of penetrating the armor of any known German tank at typical combat ranges. But in the unpredictable environment of urban warfare, those advantages counted for much less. A Panzerfaust, fired from a distance of 20 feet, cared nothing for armor thickness. Molotov cocktails, dropped from third-story windows, invariably landed on the engine decks where the armor was at its absolute thinnest. Furthermore, the Pershing weighed a hefty 46 tons. Many of Cologne's bridges simply could not support that weight. Streets that Sherman's navigated without issue became deadly traps for the heavier Pershing. Smouyer peered through his periscope as Eagle 7 slowly rolled past the skeletal remains of what had once been a bustling shopping district. Scattered mannequins lay amid the broken bricks and glass. A streetcar sat overturned, its windows entirely blown out. Massive fires had consumed entire blocks of buildings. The stench of smoke and decaying matter permeated the tank's ventilation system. Every 40 yards, the Pershing momentarily stopped while McVeigh meticulously checked the route for hidden obstacles. Rubble frequently concealed anti-personnel mines. Deep shell craters could easily break a track. The radio crackled continuously with progress reports from adjacent units. Sherman tanks were slowly clearing the narrow side streets. Infantry squads advanced cautiously, moving building by building. German resistance seemed noticeably lighter than anticipated. Most Wehrmacht units had retreated across the Rhine River under cover of the preceding night. The crucial bridges had been pre-rigged with demolition charges. German engineers awaited the final order to destroy them. Only dedicated rearguard units remained west of the river. Volunteers sworn to fight until their last bullet. Eagle 7 rounded a corner and entered a considerably broader avenue. Ahead, the magnificent twin spires of the Cologne Cathedral rose, perhaps half a mile away. The cathedral had miraculously survived the intense bombing campaign. After 262 separate raids that had reduced the surrounding city to mere fragments, the medieval Gothic structure still stood intact. Its towering spires served as key navigation points for every unit operating in the city. Every map reference began from the cathedral. Every radio transmission cited the spires as the primary landmark. The Pershing advanced another block, then another. The streets grew gradually wider as they approached the central city area. They also became significantly more dangerous. Wide streets meant substantially longer sight lines. Longer sight lines provided German gunners with extended time to acquire their targets and aim precisely. Smouyer kept his eye glued to the gun sight, systematically scanning every window and doorway. His right hand rested lightly on the turret traverse control. His left hand hovered near the trigger mechanism. At 9:15 a.m., the radio delivered new, urgent orders. German armor was now confirmed to be operating near the cathedral square. At least 2 Panthers were confirmed, with reports suggesting a possible Tiger tank presence. American infantry had been forced to pull back after sustaining heavy casualties. Eagle 7 was ordered to proceed immediately to the cathedral area and neutralize the enemy armor threat. Smouyer felt his mouth instantly go dry. The Pershing had never yet faced a Panther in a direct engagement. Every member of the crew was intimately familiar with the specifications. Panther frontal armor was 5 inches thick. Its high-velocity 75mm gun could penetrate 6 inches of steel at a range of 1,000 yards. During the campaigns in North Africa and Normandy, individual Panthers had often decimated entire American platoons. The Pershing's powerful engine rumbled louder as McVeigh increased their speed. The cathedral spires grew rapidly larger through the periscope. Somewhere just ahead, highly skilled German tank crews were patiently lying in wait. Eagle 7 approached the densely built Cathedral District around 9:30 a.m. The streets narrowed drastically once more. Buildings that somehow still stood rose 4 and 5 stories high, creating dense urban canyons where direct sunlight struggled to reach the pavement. Smoky haze, remnants of a morning's fires, drifted lazily between the ruins. McVeigh reduced the Pershing's speed to a mere walking pace. The 46-ton tank generated less noise at low throttle, but every rotation of the steel treads still reverberated loudly off the solid masonry walls. Smooyer rotated the turret incrementally, covering the left side of the street, while Davis monitored the right through his bow gun periscope. The massive 90mm main gun swung cautiously across shattered storefronts and dark alley mouths. Empty window frames stared back at them like hollow eye sockets in a massive skull. This area of Cologne had previously been a thriving commercial district, home to large department stores, lively cafes, and corporate offices. Now, it was a lethal labyrinth of collapsed structures and deep shadows where any single doorway could conceal a Panzerfaust team. The radio transmitted in sharp, abbreviated bursts. 2 full companies of American infantry were currently pinned down 3 blocks east of the cathedral. They were receiving heavy German machine gun fire from multiple positions, and mortar rounds were falling directly onto their location. They desperately required armored support, but no conventional Shermans could reach them. The approach streets were thoroughly blocked by mountains of rubble. Only the wider avenue that Eagle 7 was currently traversing offered a clear path to the Cathedral Square. Another transmission was relayed. 2 Sherman tanks from F Company had attempted to reach the cathedral from the northern approach. Both were operating without infantry support, a critically dangerous situation in urban environments, but F Company's riflemen were engaged in fierce fighting elsewhere. The Shermans were under orders to briefly scout the square, determine precise enemy positions, then immediately withdraw and await reinforcement. Early acknowledged the communication. Eagle 7 would rendezvous with the F Company Shermans near the cathedral. 3 American tanks, working together, could theoretically suppress enemy positions long enough for the infantry to safely advance. This was standard combined arms tactical procedure, the kind of operation the 3rd Armored Division had executed successfully dozens of times since landing in Normandy. The heavy Pershing rolled past a burned-out German half-track. Its crew lay nearby, likely killed by American machine gun fire sometime in the past 24 hours. Beyond the destroyed vehicle, the street abruptly opened into a small plaza. A stone fountain stood in the center, completely dry and heavily pockmarked with shell fragments. The avenue continued directly ahead, leading straight toward the cathedral spires. At 9:47 a.m., Smooyer heard a distinct sound through his headset. 2 rapid, heavy booms, clearly high caliber, echoed loudly from somewhere just ahead. Then, an unsettling silence, followed by a 3rd, echoing boom. That was unmistakable tank gunfire. The characteristic sharp crack thump of high-velocity rounds slamming into thick armor plate followed moments later. The radio immediately erupted with frantic, disorganized transmissions. An F Company Sherman had been struck. Crew members were reported bailing out. The 2nd Sherman was now taking sustained fire. The German tank's precise position was unknown, but it was confirmed to be extremely close to the cathedral. All American units were advised. A Panther was operational in the cathedral vicinity. Early's voice came through the intercom, remarkably calm despite the situation. Eagle 7 would press forward. They were the only American tank close enough to engage the threat. The F Company Shermans were likely already destroyed or completely disabled. Infantry could not advance as long as a German tank commanded the square. The mission parameters had not changed. Eliminate enemy armor. McVeigh shifted gears. The Pershing slightly accelerated, still slow by open field standards, but faster than the hyper-cautious pace they had maintained. Increased speed meant more noise. Noise meant the Germans would hear their approach. But locating sound in the echoing urban streets was challenging. The German commander would require vital seconds to accurately identify the origin and nature of the threat. Smooyer verified his ammunition load. The ready rack immediately accessible held 6 heavy 90mm rounds, 3 armor-piercing, 3 high-explosive. Darragh had efficiently organized additional rounds throughout the turret, categorized by type. In a lengthy engagement, they could potentially fire 20 rounds before needing to resupply from the hull storage area. Against a Panther, however, the fight would most likely conclude after the first 2 or 3 shots. Either Eagle 7 would rapidly destroy the German tank, or the German tank would just as rapidly destroy Eagle 7. Engagements between armored vehicles rarely lasted long. The street ahead curved slightly to the left. Beyond that curve, the cathedral square would become fully visible. Somewhere within that large square, or hidden on adjacent side street, a veteran Panther crew was waiting. They had already claimed the lives of at least 3 American tankers. They knew more Americans would be coming. Smooyer pressed his eye firmly against the rubber cushion of the gun sight. His finger migrated to the trigger. The turret traverse control felt solid and responsive beneath his right hand. Eagle 7 rounded the curve at approximately 15 miles per hour, tracks clanking rhythmically on the fracture pavement, thick exhaust streaming from the engine grills. The monumental cathedral spires suddenly dominated the forward vision blocks. The cathedral square snapped into full view at 9:52 a.m. The imposing Gothic structure utterly dominated the skyline, its twin spires soaring 516 feet above the surrounding devastation. The wide plaza in front of the cathedral measured roughly 300 yards across. It had once been meticulously paved with stone, but now shell craters and thick debris littered the surface. The vital Hohenzollern Bridge was visible beyond the cathedral, spanning the Rhine River. German engineers had prepared it with sufficient explosives to drop the entire structure into the current. Smoke drifted across the square from lingering fires in adjacent buildings. Through the hazy conditions, Smooyer could clearly see the first disabled Sherman. It sat motionless, canted awkwardly, positioned in the middle of a side street that intersected Eagle 7's avenue. Smoke poured from a now open commander's hatch. Its main gun tube pointed skyward at an unnatural angle. McVeigh skillfully brought Eagle 7 to a complete stop, 1 block away from the square. The Pershing sat concealed in the deep shadow of a partially collapsed office building. From this secure position, the crew could observe the square without dangerously exposing their vehicle. Early scrutinized the scene through his vision blocks. The Sherman had been hit at least twice, likely within seconds of the initial engagement. This indicated precise, professional gunnery. The German tank crew clearly knew their job. The second Sherman was not visible from Eagle 7's current location. Radio transmissions, however, placed it somewhere on the northern periphery of the square, also disabled. That meant the German tank, or tanks, maintained clear fields of fire covering every major approach to the cathedral. Any American vehicle attempting to cross the wide square would be instantly targeted. Early made a difficult decision. He would perform reconnaissance on foot. Leaving the Pershing stationary and somewhat exposed was a risk, but advancing blindly into a known ambush was far worse. He absolutely needed to pinpoint the German tank's precise location before committing Eagle 7 to an attack. He quickly climbed out of the turret hatch and dropped down to the street level. An American soldier suddenly emerged from a nearby doorway, 30 yards ahead. It was Technical Sergeant Jim Bates, assigned to the Army Signal Corps. He carried a 16mm film camera and wore a large rucksack packed with film magazines. Bates had been assigned the task of meticulously documenting the 3rd Armored Division's operations since the Normandy invasion. He recorded combat footage, conducted interviews with the soldiers, and filmed the liberation of towns and cities. His resulting footage frequently appeared in newsreels shown in American movie theaters. Bates had been accompanying an infantry squad when the first Sherman was struck. He had filmed the muzzle flash of the German tank, the exact impact point on the Sherman's turret, and the terrified crew attempting to escape. He possessed clear, immediate footage of the entire deadly engagement. Now, he sensed an opportunity for more. The unexpected presence of a heavy American tank in Cologne was major news. A battle pitting the experimental Pershing against a German Panther would be extraordinary material. Early and Bates moved forward together, hugging the protective cover of the building walls. They reached a critical corner where they could observe the cathedral square fully without exposing their position. Early systematically scanned the plaza. The disabled Sherman was clearly visible. Beyond it, partially hidden by a small side street, he located the Panther. The German tank was situated in a perfect ambush position, its long gun trained directly down the avenue where the Shermans had approached. The 75mm barrel extended menacingly from the angular turret, pointing like a finger toward the established kill zone. The Panther crew had chosen their position with deadly precision. They could cover the entire open square while remaining partially concealed themselves. Any American tank daring to enter from the north would expose its highly vulnerable side armor. Early quickly analyzed the geometric possibilities. The Panther could not currently see Eagle 7's position. The building provided essential cover. But if Eagle 7 moved even slightly into the square, the Germans would spot them instantly. A head-on frontal engagement across 300 yards of debris-strewn open ground was highly risky for both sides. Both tanks possessed main guns capable of penetrating the other's armor at that range. But Early realized there was an alternate strategy. A narrow side street ran parallel to Eagle 7's current avenue. If the Pershing could execute a flanking loop around the block, they might approach the Panther from the west. The German tank's gun was facing north. Its heavy turret would need to rapidly rotate to engage a threat suddenly emerging from the west. Turret rotation required time. Not a lot of time. Perhaps 3 or 4 critical seconds, but it would be enough. Enough time for a single decisive shot. Early quickly returned to Eagle 7. He explained the daring plan over the intercom system. They would advance down the parallel street. At the intersection closest to the cathedral, they would make a hard left turn, entering the square. The Panther would then be situated to their immediate right, roughly 90 degrees from Eagle 7's main gun. This maneuver would grant Smeuer a clear shot at the German tank side armor, the thinnest, most vulnerable armor, ensuring a killing shot. McVeigh confirmed the orders. Dargy swiftly loaded a fresh armor-piercing round. Davis prepared the bow gun. Smeuer rotated the turret until the massive main gun pointed right, preemptively setting the angle they would need the instant they reached the intersection. The Pershing's engine revved powerfully. The 46 tons of steel began to move. Bates positioned himself in a second-story window overlooking the cathedral square. His camera was rolling. Eagle 7 advanced rapidly toward the intersection where the waiting Panther crew expected prey from the opposite direction. Eagle 7 entered the designated side street at 9:58 a.m. The avenue was noticeably narrower than the main approach, barely accommodating the Pershing's considerable bulk. Building fragments scattered across the pavement. McVeigh skillfully navigated around a deep crater, ensuring the tank maintained a steady, purposeful speed. Too slow, and they would be an easy target. Too fast, and Smeuer wouldn't be able to aim accurately. The critical intersection ahead appeared rapidly through the driver's vision blocks. Beyond it, the cathedral square opened up to the right. Smeuer kept his eye pressed firmly to the gun sight, intensely watching the specific angle where the Panther was supposed to appear. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. The turret was already traversed 90 degrees to the right. When they cleared the corner, the German tank should ideally be centered directly in his sight picture. Should be. Combat reality rarely aligned perfectly with the plan. 50 yards to the intersection. 40 yards. 30. McVeigh maintained his speed. The loud engine noise would certainly alert the Panther crew. The Germans would hear the Pershing approaching before they could physically see it. But locating sound in the echoing urban streets was challenging. The German commander would require vital seconds to accurately identify the origin and nature of the threat. 20 yards. The Pershing's bow suddenly emerged from the side street and into the intersection. McVeigh's periscope provided him with a restricted view to the right. He spotted the Panther instantly. The German tank was positioned exactly where Early had described, approximately 110 yards away. This distance was point-blank range for the powerful 90mm gun. However, the Panther's turret was already rotating. The long gun barrel was swinging violently toward them. Someone inside the German tank had spotted the Pershing much faster than anticipated. McVeigh made a split-second, life-saving decision. He did not halt the tank. Stopping would make Eagle 7 a stationary target. A stationary tank, in this scenario, was a dead tank. He floored the throttle instead. The Pershing lurched aggressively forward into the intersection, effectively crossing directly through the German tank's projected line of fire. Smouyer saw the angular shape of the Panther instantly fill his sight picture. The distinctive turret, the lengthy cannon, the dark muzzle rapidly swinging toward his position. Every primal instinct screamed that he was staring directly down the barrel of a 75mm cannon fully capable of penetrating his armor at this short range. Training took over. Stopping meant dying. He did not wait for the Pershing to stabilize. American tanks seldom fired while moving. Their guns were not stabilized, and accuracy plummeted significantly when the vehicle was in motion. But stopping meant instant death. He compensated rapidly for the forward motion, led the moving target slightly, and squeezed the trigger. The 90mm gun fired at 9:59 a.m. and 12 seconds. The heavy armor-piercing round traversed the 110 yards of open space in a fraction of a second. It struck the Panther's turret face just below the bulky gun mantlet. The violent impact was highly visible even through the smoke and massive muzzle flash. A blinding shower of white-hot sparks erupted from the point of contact. Inside the Panther, metal fragments spalled off the interior surface, turning into lethal shrapnel that instantly tore through the crew compartment. Inside the immobilized German Panther, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelborth struggled to comprehend the visual anomaly. The tank that had suddenly appeared in the intersection was too low and possessed an angular shape unlike the Shermans. It looked almost similar to their own designs. He hesitated briefly. Could it possibly be a friendly vehicle? This fatal question lasted perhaps half a second. Then, the shattering impact arrived. McVeigh finally brought the Pershing to a definitive halt, right in the center of the intersection. They were now completely exposed. No cover remained, but stationary meant Smouyer could now aim with precision. Darragh already had another heavy armor-piercing round his grip. The breech was wide open. He slammed the round home and locked the breech mechanism. Smouyer had never removed his eye from the sight. The first shot had been placed high. A good hit, certainly, but not catastrophic enough. The Panther remained combat operational. He adjusted his aim point slightly lower, targeting the thin hull side, just beneath the turret ring. The Panther's side armor was significantly thinner than the front, 40mm instead of 80. The 90mm gun could penetrate 40mm with ease. He fired again at 9:59 a.m. and 17 seconds. The second round slammed into the Panther's right side, penetrating the armor plate completely and tearing straight through the crew compartment. The projectile exited through the left side armor, leaving two clean holes the size of large dinner plates. Inside the tank, essential systems began to fail rapidly. Hydraulics ruptured violently. Ammunition began to ignite. Bartelborth threw open his hatch and rapidly bailed out. He landed hard on the street behind the Panther, moving away from the Pershing. 3 other crewmen swiftly followed, scrambling desperately out of their hatches as thick smoke began pouring from the engine compartment. One man was tragically unable to escape. Smouyer fired a third time at 9:59 a.m. and 23 seconds. This final round struck low on the turret, just above where the hull connected to the turret basket. Intense fire erupted instantly from the impact point. The flames spread rapidly, fueled by leaking gasoline and burning hydraulic fluid. Within mere seconds, the entire Panther was engulfed in a raging inferno. In a second-story window, Jim Bates kept his 16mm camera rolling continuously. He had perfectly captured the entire engagement. 45 dramatic seconds elapsed from the first fired shot until the Panther was fully burning. The resultant film showed everything. The Pershing entering the intersection, the German gun rotating rapidly, the muzzle flashes, the 3 distinct impacts, and the crew scrambling to escape. Smouyer leaned back from the gun sight. His hands were visibly shaking. The formidable Panther was destroyed. Eagle 7 was structurally intact. Every crewman was alive. The Pershing had triumphantly proven its capability. The Panther burned intensely for the next 3 hours. Ammunition continuously cooked off inside the hull, sending sparks and lethal fragments high into the air. By noon, the massive fire had consumed every flammable item. The turret sat cocked at an odd angle, heat warped and blackened. The bodies of German soldiers who had been supporting the Panther lay scattered near the cathedral square. The infantry units quickly withdrew across the Rhine once their armored support was annihilated. The resounding boom of heavy tank guns in the city center signaled clearly that their defensive position was rapidly collapsing. American troops moved into the area by early afternoon. Bates descended from his precarious observation post and approached Eagle 7. The crew was now standing outside the Pershing, calmly smoking cigarettes and meticulously checking the tank for any damage. They had not sustained a single hit. Bartleborth's fatal half-second hesitation had cost his crew those critical seconds. Bates filmed the crew members posing near their victorious tank. Smooyer stood slightly to the side, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. By 2 p.m., additional American units had fully secured the cathedral area. Engineers began the dangerous task of checking the Hohenzollern Bridge for demolition charges. Infantry squads cleared remaining buildings methodically. Resistance was light and sporadic. Most surviving German forces had retreated eastward during the engagement with the Panther. But the battle for Cologne was far from over. German units still tenaciously held pockets of the city east of the cathedral. Isolated strong points required systematic elimination. Eagle 7 received new orders. Continue the advance. The crew remounted. McVeigh restarted the powerful engine. The Pershing rolled deeper into the ruined city. At 2:32 p.m., Eagle 7 entered an incredibly narrow street blocks away from the cathedral. Buildings rose sheer on both sides, forming a restrictive corridor barely wider than the tank itself. Ahead, the street opened into a small intersection. Beyond that intersection, the route led toward the Rhine riverbank. A black civilian automobile suddenly appeared from a side street, racing rapidly across the intersection. The car was moving at extremely high speed, dangerously weaving between the debris. To Smooyer, it looked exactly like a staff car. German officers frequently used similar vehicles to move swiftly between command posts. In the context of urban combat, any unidentified vehicle was instantly considered a potential threat. Civilians had been ordered to evacuate weeks earlier. Anyone remaining in Cologne was either a combatant or actively supporting the German war effort. Smooyer instantly opened fire with the coaxial machine gun. Tracer rounds streaked across the intersection. Several rounds struck the car's body panels. Glass shattered violently, but the vehicle did not halt. It continued across the intersection, disappearing down another street. At that exact moment, from a cleverly concealed position to Smooyer's left, a German Panzer IV fired its machine gun at the same fleeing car. The tank sat hidden behind a partially collapsed building, completely invisible to Eagle 7. Its crew had also spotted the automobile and quickly engaged. The combined, concentrated fire from both American and German tanks raked the vehicle mercilessly. The car jerked violently to a stop. The driver slumped over the steering wheel. A passenger door swung open. A figure fell onto the debris-strewn street and did not move. Smooyer registered the muzzle flash from the German tank. It was a Panzer IV, an older model, likely a Mark IV Ausf. Not as inherently dangerous as the Panther, but still fully capable of destroying a Sherman. Against the Pershing, the odds favored the American tank. But the Panzer's position was tactically superb. It had complete cover. Eagle 7 sat dangerously exposed in the middle of the narrow street. The German tank began to reverse, backing deeper into its concealed position behind the collapsed building. Smooyer could only see the very front portion of its hull, not enough to guarantee a killing shot. The Panzer vanished completely behind the rubble. McVeigh desperately attempted to maneuver the Pershing for a better angle, but the narrow street severely limited movement options. The structure concealing the German tank was a 4-story residential building. The front facade had been blown away, but the rear portion still stood firm. Interior walls were visible through the gap. The Panzer was hidden somewhere behind those walls, actively repositioning itself for another shot. Smooyer made another swift decision. He could not see the German tank, but he could see the building providing its cover. He rotated the turret until the 90mm gun pointed squarely at the base of the standing wall section. The high-explosive round already in the breach was designed specifically to destroy fortifications and structures. He aimed meticulously for the corner support, where the wall's structural integrity was at its weakest point. The gun fired at 2:34 p.m. and 48 seconds. The high explosive round detonated powerfully against the brick and concrete. The explosion tore away a 6-foot wide section of the corner support. For a brief, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then, the laws of physics asserted themselves. Without that crucial corner support, the entire massive wall section lost its stability. For stories of heavy masonry and wooden beams began to collapse inward instantly. The building fell onto itself in a deafening cascade of dust and fragments. Tons of rubble crashed downward, completely filling the space where the Panzer IV had been concealed seconds before. The tremendous noise echoed through the street like apocalyptic thunder. Thick dust clouds billowed outward, obscuring all visibility for several tense seconds. When the dust finally settled, the building was gone. In its place sat a gigantic mountain of broken stone and twisted metal. Somewhere beneath that crushing pile, a German tank sat buried. Inside that trapped tank, 18-year-old machine gunner Gustav Schaefer and his commander had only seconds to scramble out before the rubble completely sealed them inside. Schaefer and his tank commander desperately clawed their way out of the Panzer IV through the turret hatch. Rubble completely covered the tank's hull. The air was thick with dust, making breathing difficult. They scrambled over broken masonry and steel beams, moving rapidly away from the American tank before more devastating rounds could arrive. The remaining crew stayed inside the buried vehicle, struggling to extract themselves through other hatches. Within minutes, all 4 crew members managed to escape. They vanished into the ruins, making their way urgently toward the Rhine. By nightfall, they had successfully crossed the river and subsequently surrendered to American military police. Eagle 7 continued its relentless operations in Cologne for another 2 days. The entire city officially fell to American forces by March 8th. Engineers successfully secured the crucial Hohenzollern Bridge before the German demolition teams could destroy it, though other bridges spanning the Rhine had already been blown. The cathedral stood, a magnificent Gothic monument towering above the scene of devastation. Bates's intense footage of the Panther engagement quickly reached newsreel editors within a week. The film was featured in American movie theaters by late March. Smuyer's sister watched it at a local cinema back in Pennsylvania. She recognized her brother instantly and brought their parents to view the screening the following day. The 3rd Armored Division did not rest. By March 10th, they were already advancing east beyond the Rhine, pushing deeper into the German heartland. Resistance varied widely. Some towns immediately surrendered without a fight. Other locations required the grinding clearance of house-to-house combat. The Wehrmacht was demonstrably disintegrating, but isolated units stubbornly continued to follow orders. Fanatical SS troops and Hitler Youth members fought fiercely, throwing themselves at American tanks armed with Panzerfausts. On March 30th, Major General Maurice Rose was riding at the front of a column south of Paderborn. His unwavering command style had never changed. He still insisted on leading from forward positions, refusing to direct operations from secure rear headquarters. At approximately 6 p.m., his jeep unexpectedly encountered a large German tank unit that had managed to breach the American lines. Massive Tiger tanks blocked the road directly ahead. Rose's driver attempted a sharp evasive maneuver, but a Tiger commander instantly cut them off. The German soldier emerged from the turret hatch and aimed a machine pistol at the jeep. Rose reached for his own sidearm, perhaps intending to surrender his weapon or, perhaps, to offer resistance. The German fired. Rose was hit multiple times and died instantly. He remains the highest-ranking American officer killed by direct enemy fire in the European theater of operations. His body was recovered the next day by elements of the 3rd Armored Division. Smuyer's unit participated in the recovery operation. Rose's death deeply affected the entire division. Soldiers who had served under him since North Africa struggled profoundly with the loss. He had been a tough, demanding commander, but always fair. Crucially, he had always taken the same risks he demanded of his men. His funeral was held at the Netherlands American Cemetery in Margareten. Thousands attended. The war continued its destructive path. The 3rd Armored pushed eastward throughout April, encountering pockets of resistance that collapsed quickly once engaged. By late April, German units were surrendering en masse. The Wehrmacht had effectively ceased to exist as an organized, cohesive fighting force. On May 7th, Germany surrendered unconditionally. May 8th was officially declared Victory in Europe Day. Smüger remained stationed in Germany through the summer months as part of the massive occupation force. Eagle 7 was eventually shipped back across the Atlantic to the United States for thorough display and exhaustive study. The Ordnance Department was eager to analyze the Pershing's impressive combat performance. Engineers meticulously documented every single scratch and dent on the armor plating. Ballistic experts measured the gun barrel wear. Maintenance crews carefully noted any mechanical issues encountered. By September 1945, Smüger received his long-awaited orders to return home. He sailed from Bremerhaven to New York City aboard a troop transport vessel. The voyage took 8 days. He reported to Fort Dix, New Jersey, for final processing. Within a week, he received his official discharge papers. Corporal Clarence Smüger, United States Army, was formally released from active duty on September 24, 1945. He returned to Lee Highway, Pennsylvania, where his parents still lived, to familiar streets and people who remembered him as the quiet boy who had never wanted to engage in a fight. He secured employment at a local cement plant. He married Melba Whitehead in 1946. They raised 3 children. He rarely spoke openly about the war, but the war itself had not finished with him. At night, he was plagued by persistent nightmares of Cologne. The cathedral spires soaring above the smoke, the Panther burning intensely in the square, and, most hauntingly, the black automobile speeding across the intersection, caught violently between American and German fire. He saw the figure falling from the passenger door onto the shattered cobblestones. That single, horrific image would relentlessly haunt Clarence Smüger for the next 68 years. For decades, Smüger carried the immense psychological weight of that single moment. The woman in the car, the figure who fell dead to the street. He had absolutely no idea who she was. He did not know if his machine gun bullets had killed her, or if the German tank's fire had been responsible for her death. He only knew, with chilling certainty, that she was dead and that he had pulled the trigger. His wife, Melba, witnessed the ongoing torment of his nightmares. He would often awaken, swinging his fists violently at unseen enemies. The memories were so profoundly vivid that decades felt compressed into mere days. His son, Barry, tragically died of a heroin overdose in the 1970s. Melba developed Alzheimer's disease and eventually forgot his name entirely. She passed away in 2017 after 71 years of marriage. The people who had grounded Smüger's post-war life were slowly gone. The persistent specter of the war remained. In 1996, at the age of 73, Smüger saw Jim Bates's original footage of Cologne for the very first time. A documentary about the 3rd Armored Division included the dramatic cathedral duel, but the footage also clearly showed something Smüger had never clearly perceived during the heat of the battle. The black automobile, the machine gun fire, the passenger falling from the car, a young woman dead. The image unequivocally confirmed what Smüger had internally feared for 50 years. He had killed a civilian. The knowledge was utterly crushing, yet it paradoxically created a powerful need for resolution. He desperately wanted to know her identity. He wanted to apologize to her family, if possible. He longed for forgiveness, though deep down, he did not believe he deserved it. In 2013, at age 89, Smüger traveled back to Cologne. A dedicated German journalist had extensively researched the obscure incident and successfully identified the victim. Katharina Esser, 26 years old, the youngest of 4 sisters. She had stayed behind to care for her aging parents while her sisters married and started their own families. She worked as a clerk in a local grocery store and took evening classes in home economics. On March 6, 1945, she and her employer had been attempting to drive quickly out of the besieged city. They were caught tragically in the crossfire. The journalist organized a meeting at Esser's gravesite. Smüger arrived expecting only to confront his solitary guilt. Instead, he found Gustav Schaefer waiting there for him. This was the German gunner whose Panzer IV had also fired on the car, the man who had been buried under tons of rubble when Smüger collapsed the residential building. Both men were 18 years older than they had been on that destructive day in 1945. Both men carried the exact same traumatic memory. Both believed, deep down, that they were responsible for killing Katerina Esser. They met near the iconic cathedral steps. Smeuer cautiously extended his hand. Schaefer firmly took it. They walked together to the mass grave where Esser was buried alongside numerous other civilian casualties. Neither man could say whose bullets had ended her life. Perhaps both contributed. Perhaps neither could claim sole responsibility. The sheer chaos of intense urban combat made certainty impossible. What truly mattered was the shared recognition that both had fired their weapons. They shared the profound responsibility. They shared the crippling guilt. Schaefer gently placed yellow roses on the grave. Smeuer knelt to do the same, but momentarily lost his balance. Schaefer instinctively caught him before he fell. Two aging men who had violently attempted to kill each other 68 years earlier now stood physically supporting one another at the grave of the innocent woman caught between them. Shared responsibility brought unexpected peace. They became unlikely friends. Letters crossed the expansive Atlantic. Video calls connected Pennsylvania and Germany. They discussed the war, not as former enemies, but as fellow survivors attempting to process the enduring trauma. Schaefer passed away in 2017. Smeuer sent flowers to the funeral with a simple, poignant note. "I will never forget you, your brother in arms, Clarence." On September 18, 2019, Clarence Smeuer was finally awarded the Bronze Star for Valor in a solemn ceremony held in Washington, D.C. He was 95 years old, the last surviving member of Eagle 7's crew. The other crew members received their medals posthumously, their families accepted on their behalf. Clarence Smeuer died peacefully on September 30th, 2022, at his home in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He was 99 years old. Every March 6th since that meeting in 2013, fresh yellow roses have mysteriously appeared on Katerina Esser's grave in Cologne. Someone remembers her sacrifice. Someone still apologizes for the chaos of war. The panther still sits in front of the Cologne Cathedral in old archival photographs, frozen in time, burning fiercely. The Pershing that definitively destroyed, it is proudly displayed at the National Armor and Cavalry Museum. The film footage still exists, 45 critical seconds that fundamentally changed America's understanding of armored warfare tactics. But the most significant part of the story was never truly about the tanks. It was about ordinary men who were sent to war, who killed because they were compelled by orders, and who spent the remainder of their lives striving desperately to find peace with the terrible things they had been forced to do. If this deeply human story resonated with you, the way it moved us here at the battlefields, please do us a huge favor. Hit that like button right now. Every single like sends a strong signal to YouTube to share this important human story with more viewers. Hit subscribe and ensure you turn on notifications. We are committed to rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about quiet tank gunners who never desired conflict but achieved extraordinary competence when faced with it. Real people, exhibiting real heroism, suffering real guilt, and ultimately finding real redemption. Drop a comment immediately below and tell us where you are currently watching this video from. Are you watching from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, or Australia? Our dedicated community stretches across the entire world. You are not merely a viewer. You are an essential part of keeping these powerful memories vividly alive. Tell us your geographical location. Tell us if someone in your own family bravely served in this conflict. Just let us know you are here and listening. Thank you sincerely for watching today, and thank you for helping ensuring that Clarence Smeuer and Katerina Esser do not vanish into silence. These people wholeheartedly deserve to be remembered, and you are actively helping make that happen.